Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Speaking Sessions podcast. I'm really excited to have Gresh on. We actually met through a really cool thing called HARO, and we'll get into that here within this episode. But let me give you a little intro about him. We got Gresham Harkless here. He is the founder of CBNation and Blue 16 Media. CBNation is a business-to-business brand focusing on increasing the business success rate by providing visibility and resources for CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business owners. CB Nation consists of blogs, podcasts, and videos. Blue 16 Media helps change lives through media and technology, including a digital marketing agency providing digital marketing services, including web design and SEO to small and medium-sized businesses and organizations. Central to his marketing philosophy is that you are a media company developing a marketing strategy to connect with your target and reach your goals. Gresham is a proud graduate of Howard University and Georgetown University, and he was selected in 2022 as a top 50 plus Black marketer on the rise in the influencer and media innovators. He also is a graduate of 2020 Leadership Center for Excellence Young Professionals Program 16 and recognized by the Alexandria Virginia Chamber of Commerce 40s under 40 in 2022 and a 2022 Northern Virginia 40 under 40 honoree. Gresh, man, you've got a tremendous background, and this is going to be an exciting episode to really help us understand how to get our visibility online, on social media. I'm really excited to talk with you, but tell us a little bit more about yourself on a personal perspective.
Yeah, Philip, I truly appreciate that. It always is interesting to kind of hear the bios of the things that you've done. Kind of makes you a little bit more bashful about, those things. But for me, I'm very much so a busybody. I think that's the best way to kind of say it. So, from a young age, I was pretty much the kid that kind of tinkered with a lot of different things. I started like a family newspaper when I was actually 10 years old. My dad was in the military, so he went I think the term is TDY. So he went to an entirely different country for like a year. And this was before we had Zoom, Facebook, live stream, all these things that we have at our fingertips. As I started that family newspaper and just, got on Microsoft Word and I put some clip art in and I would talk about the things that were going on in our family. And then I would send them to my dad. And then ultimately I would also sell the subscriptions to family members and friends too. And that's just a little about like kind of what, got me going, I guess, at a very young age. But I've always liked to tinker with stuff, whether it's technology or just, I guess, media and content. That's what we call it now. But,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the Springfield, Virginia area. I have my fiance, her son, and and my dog, and all of us are just kind of adjusting and just getting ready to live our lives as best as possible. But that's just a little bit about me, what kind of gets me going. But I appreciate the opportunity to kind of be on the show.
Of course, of course. And that's interesting. Two things. One, that you kind of were blogging without blogging before there was a such thing as blogging when you were young. And two, that you sold a subscription about essentially your life and the happenings to your family.
Yeah, it was all our lives.
Yeah, it's funny. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and buy something about myself. That just seems kind of crazy. I guess it's
Yeah.
kind of like buying your own product, though. You want to make sure you support yourself. So that's awesome. It says a
Yeah.
lot about your family for sure.
I know. And I think it's so funny because I think, people know what's going on to some degree, but,
Mm-hmm.
there's always a big market for being able to kind of compile information. And especially if it's like gossip or things that you don't know. So
Mm-hmm.
even I remember my mom kept all of them. So I did it for like 2 years. My mom kept all of them. So I was going through them. And there was one where my grandma had a squirrel get in her house. So that was like the headline, feature that I had, going on. And it's just like all those little things. And like, there was a wedding that didn't happen. So all these things. And I was like, tune back next week to find that out. So for whatever reason, and I used to read a lot, at a young age and, read newspapers and things like that. So I've always like, I guess, been attracted to like content, before, what that is and, how to do that. But you start to realize like what kind of draws people in more than anything else.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially writing at that young of an age, that you really learn how to actually draw people in. And I can just imagine now the headline be like, squirrel attacks grandma's house or something like that. Especially at
Exactly.
that young age, you just say something silly and laugh.
Yeah. And definitely you need the clickbait. So you have to subscribe to actually click to see and read the rest of the story. That would have been the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you make that transition then? Or before I get into that, I'm forgetting my very first question. So clearly you've always been kind of, I guess, more writing than talking, but how did you get over that fear of public speaking?
It's so funny. Like when you mentioned, in the bio that I went to Howard, University, and I would consider myself not someone that was very much so, I have this fear, so let me go attack this fear and do things like that. But I think one of the beauties of college is that you get the opportunity to kind of step outside of your comfort zone. And I did that a lot in college. So there were things that I was, fearful of. And I took it upon myself to kind of get outside of my comfort zone, to face my fears and do those things. So I wouldn't say that I've ever conquered fear, the public speaking, but I would say one thing that I specifically remember doing and making it a point to do, I think it was my sophomore year of college, was to take a public speaking class. And I think that once I started to do that, first of all, that got me out of my comfort zone, but I think it's also kind of reframing fear, reframing the I guess uncomfortableness around public speaking, or just anything that your fears might be. And I took like kind of small steps towards facing that fear and realizing that the thing that I built up in my head wasn't as much as it seems. And even as you sometimes you might freeze at this point, your heart might be beating like crazy when you're speaking, but you're still able to do it and you're still able to make an impact. It starts to, I think, lessen the power of that fear. So I think, to answer your question, definitely that public speaking class was a huge help. But I think just gradually over time, I just try to really face any fear that I might have, whether it be, going to talk to a girl or, just all those things that you build up in your head and you can't face it, that you start to realize that it's not as big as it seems once you go through and tackle it.
I like that. And it's so true that any fear you have, as long as you just go into it, well, you build it up so much more in our head. And actually heard a little bit different story there, but that I'm about to share on a podcast. Somebody was talking about that. A lot of people struggle with visualization, but the funny thing is we visualize so much, especially in fearful situations, of what's going to happen. So we can't say that we don't know how to visualize on a positive perspective, such as like what's going to happen in our lives or how our life's going to look in 10 years from now, because we can do that so well when we're thinking about, I've got to have this tough conversation with my wife, or man, I just spent this money. Oh man, she's going to do all these things. She's going to kill me, all sorts of stuff. And you're visualizing all this. So totally different thought there. But yeah, we just need to go ahead and go through with it, because whatever we can imagine is going to happen usually isn't as bad as what will happen. And it's almost the opposite. When we do overcome that fear and actually do that work, it's actually almost greater what happens to us than we think will happen as well, which is also interesting.
Yeah, I'll definitely echo that and say that's so true. And I don't know what the percentage is, but we sometimes can have those negative doomsday thoughts, and we can take that power and kind of push it towards something that can actually benefit us and propel us forward. Then I imagine there's so many phenomenal things that we can all ultimately end up doing so much better.
Yeah, totally agree. So I want to get back to how the transition from childhood, where you were writing these things, and you said, I guess you were actually selling subscriptions, so you technically were making money off of this. But how did you go from that, we'll call it little boy job, to big boy job, where you were actually making money from doing blog posts or things related around blog posts? Because I don't know if your blogs are necessarily making money or not. So you could share that with us if you want. But how did you go to using blogs to help you actually make big boy money, in quotes?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely a lot of years, between then, that was like when I was 10, I was in college, like, facing those fears and kind of reframing those fears when I was around, 18, 19, 20, I guess you can say. And then it probably wasn't until I would say maybe 27, 25, 26, 27 or so that I started my business, so to speak. So I ended up starting a digital marketing company, Blue 16 Media. And a lot of that was just around realizing sometimes the gifts that you have, the things that you notice that other people want to pay for. And I guess that big boy money really started around then, when I started to realize that, hey, people need help with things like creating content, blogs, and things like that. But really what was my kind of foothold in was actually SEO, which stands for search engine optimization. So it's really understanding what your target market is looking for and kind of working backwards from there. So the same thing that I was talking about when I was 10, where I said, I realized that, hey, if I said, hey, tune back next month to find out what happened with the squirrel that got into my grandma's house, were the same things that I started to realize that people were searching for. So if you have local businesses, they're searching for potentially what exactly you do, and they want you to kind of help provide a service for what their problems are. So that's the kind of whole thing around SEO. And I started to really focus on that, and I met somebody in a networking group, and that's when I started to like build that business. But along the same time, I was still doing the blogs, CEO Blog Nation, CBNation, all those things, and really trying to understand more about business and entrepreneurship. And gradually over time, as I had two things that I was kind of holding on, I started to realize that part of like my marketing philosophy is around building your own media company, so to speak. And that's just really using content, information, just all these things we have at our fingertips to really connect you with your ideal client. So that's where things started to merge together, where the blogs, the podcast became a way for me to network, became a way for me to build relationships, to create content that could help serve the clients that I was also trying to provide digital marketing services for. So I would sound better if I said that I had this grand scheme and idea, but I started to really just think that, hey, if I want to really grow Blue 16 Media, I would probably invest in, an entrepreneur magazine, or do these things that try to connect with my target market. And oh, by the way, I have been interviewing people, I have been reaching out to them. So the main, driver for that has definitely been, being able to build more digital marketing clients. But there's also other things like affiliate links. You start to realize that there's more opportunities down the line, once you start to build something. And that's kind of like, where I've kind of transitioned towards making the adult money, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Well, awesome, man. I mean, that's a great thing. And I want to ask a question, and this is a little selfishly, but it will help other people as well. So say that I'm working to help people get on stage, because that's what I'm doing, is helping people find ways to get on stage. What could I do from, SEO marketing perspective to help get my name out there without me literally talking to every single person in their DMs like, hey, you want to get on stage? How can I help you get on stage? So what are some things that I can do and others can do within there, but I'm using me specifically, just have a specific example to be able to get that message out, to be able to get in front of the right people?
Yeah, and I think one of the best exercises, and this is really like a really good way to figure out like sometimes what your content strategy will be, your content calendar will look like, is think about the things that people ask you on a regular basis related to speaking. I love the intro question that you have for this show, and just really understanding, how people got over that fear, because there's such probably a stigma, and you would know better than anybody, around like public speaking. So I'm sure that, people may not come to you and say, hey, how do I get over the fear necessarily, but they might search on their devices when nobody else is around, when they, they're just by themselves, knowing that this is something that they want to do, but they want to figure out how to kind of get over that. So those questions, what are the different ways that I can get my name out there, prior to public speaking? Do I need to have a book to be a public speaker? Just all these questions that you probably hear on a regular basis. That's really, really great blog content, because people are actually searching, for that specific, information. And if you're able to create the content and attract people to those different blog posts, typically, that are going to, help you to rank higher, but also to help people get the solution they're looking for, that's going to be a really great way to kind of attract people. But another great, like, kind of, insider tip is that if you ever gone to Google, and I don't know if you're going to Google, where you're like, I'm looking for X, Y, and Z, you start typing in 2 of maybe the 7 words that you want to type in, and Google completes it for you. The reason for that is because Google already has data that shows that people are already searching for things. So before you hit enter and you see that there's a list of different, questions or different things that you're searching for, and it could be related to speaking, you probably have content related to blog posts that you can create based on some of those questions, because a lot of people are looking for that. So those are just some, quick and, easy ways, just by, already knowing the questions that you have. But the whole idea of SEO is working backwards and saying, okay, I serve this client, they have this problem. How do I create the content to attract those people so that they know that I can be a solution to their problems?
Nice. I love it. I'm over here like taking some notes real quick on that, because that's perfect. Definitely go and figure out what those questions that people normally ask. And that's actually why I put how do you get over the fear of public speaking? Because I want to hear those different perspectives from people to let the audience know, hey, if you've got that fear, that's usually the very first question. How do I get over that fear of public speaking? For people that have not been in the public speaking sector at all. And yeah, I like that. Go into Google and type in a couple of the keywords, if you will, and then looking at that list and really taking that list. And that's the note I put, was take that list and create blogs around that, create content around that, because clearly Google knows what people are searching, which is kind of creepy, but also the cool thing, a good thing for people that are trying to create business online around that. So I want to ask the next question I want to ask is around HARO and everything. And that's how we met, actually. One of my mentors in Apex, Ryan Stewman, he's the one that he always pushes for people to be able to build their presence, is to get published on things such as HARO, and obviously getting on podcasts and being on social media and all that stuff. And we actually connected through HARO because of your CBNation blog. And so I've been on your podcast, and we finally were able to get you on mine. We've both been very busy with that. But how does all that work? And I know we mentioned offline about a couple other ones, so I'd love for you to share what HARO is, which is Help a Reporter Out, and how that works and how that could help other people grow their businesses.
Absolutely. And, part of, what I talk about a lot is really, building your own media company. And that's really like leveraging the different social media tools, podcasts, blogs, whatever it is that you decide as part of your recipe to help you to get to, whatever it is that you're trying to do. If you're a speaker, how are you going to really build up your brand so that you can, be and attract people to come to you for these stages so that you can, speak on. So in the same vein, I always say, if you don't decide that you want to build a media company, or even as you're building a media company, jump on other people's their own media companies. And I say all that to say that's kind of like the whole impetus of and the idea behind HARO, Help a Reporter Out. It's basically journalists who are creating content and are looking for sources to try to help publish their content. So I've been using HARO basically on both sides. So I've been featured on sites, and I've also been, a publisher of content. So I've been on, Fox Business News and, all these different publications, Reader's Digest, largely because I've used HARO and I've submitted my expertise and been published by the writers that were looking for that content. So the really big opportunity is that, and this also really ties in with SEO, because it gets you high quality backlinks. It gets you that reputation. If you can say I've been featured on this place, this place, this place, and they're all reputable, that just builds your overall presence so that somebody's more likely to want to invite you on their stage because you've been featured in, A, B, and C in these different places. So the really great thing about HARO is that there's different journalists that are writing content, and they're usually from really higher ranking sites as well too. So you can't just join HARO typically by having and building a site and saying, hey, I just built a site yesterday, I want to publish on HARO. What happens is there has to be a high, and I think it's over 1 million Alexa ranking. And all that basically means is that your site is not just any site, it's actually a site that has a high ranking, that has a decent amount of traffic before you as a journalist can publish on HARO. So I say all that to say that you will also have the opportunity, if you're published, to get published on higher ranking sites. So you just want to really, take the time to go through the questions, to know your expertise, your knowledge, your genius, figure out what questions that you can provide answers to and how you can potentially get published. But you want to continue to kind of do that. But it's a tremendous opportunity. And there's some other kind of, clones or offshoots or sites that I can mention that do that as well too. But HARO is one of the really big ones, and the ones that we've been leveraging for years.
I like that. And I'm just thinking for myself, and I'm sure a lot of the audience is thinking like, hey, I probably could use this. This sounds like a great idea. be able to help get content out around my niche topic. But I'm not like CB Nation, where if I have that credibility, I have all those eyes on my website. So is there a way for us to start doing that, to be able to get up to that point where we have the credibility to be a journalist source on something like HARO?
Yeah, and absolutely. And you have a way to join HARO in two different ways. You can join as a journalist, or you can join as kind of like an expert or contributor. So there's essentially two different paths on the, I guess, the yellow brick road that you can decide which way you're going to go. So as a contributor, you don't have to have the cachet, so to speak. You don't have to have the level, the traffic, all those things to be a contributor. You can be a contributor right now and today, and it's basically free to join. You just have to, fill out and create an account, and you'll start getting at least 3 to 4, I believe, emails directly sent to you that'll allow you to start submitting to these journalists. And these journalists, these sites typically have to have a higher ranking for you to be published. So if you have that expert, you have the knowledge, and you know that X, Y, and Z, whatever that might be asked, then you can go ahead and start submitting today.
Well, awesome. Yeah, and that's obviously how we met. I don't have the ranking to be on the journalist side, but that's kind of a little bit more where my question is. I'm appreciate
Okay.
you explaining that. But as far as like it, for my, I'll go back to using it for myself. So if I want to start getting other speakers and start asking them, how do you get over the fear of public speaking? What did you do to get on stage? Just questions like that to build up my credibility and build out my blog post. How could I do that as somebody who doesn't have a ton of eyes on their website?
Yeah, it's so funny. That's a great question. I'm sorry I misunderstood it,
Oh, you're
but
fine. You're fine. I
yeah,
didn't explain it well enough. So
no, you're fine. So what I actually did, and funny enough, I'm gonna segue into these other tools that you can use, because when I realized that I didn't have the site to be able to submit to HARO initially out of the gate, what I started to do was find other mediums that didn't have that ranking that I could use to get the traffic. When I got the traffic, then I was able to use HARO. So to answer your question, there's definitely sites like Turkle's one, for example, and I don't know if they have a barrier, but it's TERKEL. And actually the person that founded it was also featured on our blog as well too. And that's how I found out about it. It actually is kind of like a HARO clone. But the difference is, for publishers, they will actually publish the content for you. So they'll basically compile the answers and then submit it for you. And you have the opportunity again to increase the traffic, increase the eyeballs that are going to your site, and gradually you'll start to increase your Alexa ranking. Another one that's out of Australia primarily, but it's kind of worldwide, but it's mostly based in Australia, is SourceBottle. SourceBottle, and I can't remember the exact URL, but if you type SourceBottle in Google, you should be brought to it. It will allow you to also be able to submit certain questions that you're looking for. So to really kind of give you a little bit more behind the scenes, the things that I did is, whenever there was a post and someone was featured, one of the things that I realized that journalists don't necessarily do, because they just want to get the article submitted, they just want to get the article completed, they will pretty much just post the article. And a lot of times I only found out that I was featured because I would just search certain things and I would see, hey, I was featured. I never got any notification. What I did, and what I recommend everybody do, is to, when you start to compile those answers, reply back to everybody to let them know if they got selected, or even if they didn't get selected, so that they can actually share it out. Because what you want to do is start to drive more and more traffic to your blog post, to your site as a whole. And it's only going to happen, typically I found, if people are featured. If they have the opportunity to say, hey, I was featured here, they're going to want to share that out again to build their credibility. And definitely everybody should do that. So it ends up being a lot more of a win-win. But I've noticed that a lot of people don't necessarily take that extra step. And because they don't take that extra step, they don't get the traffic and opportunity that they could. So that's definitely like a little bit more, insider information, but I think it's something that's extremely valuable to build up your Alexa ranking and your site reputation.
yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I know you had actually reached out to me and said, hey, I posted your input, whatever that for the article, and it gave me that link, so I knew it was there, and then I actually shared it because of that. So that just, one, I went and put my eyes on it, but then two, my audience didn't put their eyes on it because I'm like, oh, cool, I actually got published somewhere, which was really cool. And there's a Google Alerts, I think, and I don't know how to set that up, but Google Alerts, if your name comes up, or keywords that are around your business and everything, that you can set up. And do you actually happen to know how to do that? If you don't, we could skip that. But
yeah, you actually, it's pretty fairly easy. You can basically go to Google and you just type in whatever might be the specific alert. So definitely create one around your name. And I always say, like, if depending on what your name is, you can use quotation marks. So like, there's not a lot of Gresham Harklesses. The only other Gresham Harkless I know of is going to be my dad. So usually I don't have that problem. But say if you had a really common name with John Smith, for example, you might decide that you want to put John Smith in quotations because you don't want just John or just Smith or Smith John to show up in your notifications. So you basically put quotations around your name, and then you'll set it up as far as an alert. And I believe you can choose the frequency of how often you want to receive information about when you're alerted, but that will basically signal to you when you have been submitted. But one thing I want to just mention as well too, and I know this more from an SEO perspective, is that everything that is found by Google is not everything that's online. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you will get pinged for everything that's ever been submitted about you, because if the site isn't actually crawled by Google, it won't necessarily show up on that because that's coming from Google. So just one of the things that you want to try to keep in mind, that if a site hasn't been crawled, or even if you've been featured somewhere and it's just crawled years later, sometimes you'll get that notification. You're like, why did I just find out about this? Sometimes it's just because it hasn't been crawled, and that's what Google kind of focuses on.
Okay, so explain real quick what crawled means. I think I know what it means, but just explain it, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely let me know if I go too much in the deep end. But essentially what search engines do is they're Google spiders. And a lot of times you'll hear that phrase because spiders will go through the content that's on the internet, and they will comb through and understand what's to follow on different pages and posts of a site, essentially find out what a site is about, so that when somebody searches, they can find exactly what they're looking for as quickly and accurately as possible. So what Google does is they send out these spiders essentially, and they will crawl what's on the site. So you hear the word crawled because usually that they call it Google spiders. So the idea is that spiders crawl and they find out what's on the site. But the most common like actual SEO term you probably want to pay attention to is index. So is your site indexed, which essentially means that it's within Google's kind of library, for lack of a better term. So Google has awareness around not everything that's online, but they're trying to find as much information as possible. So sometimes you'll hear, like, there was a site called I think it was called Rap Genius at the time. I think it's called Genius now. I read an article years ago that they were doing some, and again, let me know if I'm going too far in the deep end, black hat SEO strategies. And essentially what they were trying to do is cheat Google. So what they did is Google took their site offline, essentially. They unindexed the entire site, largely because they were doing unethical practices. So I say all that to say that everything that is within Google and that you search for is not everything that's online. And also too, if you're not doing ethical practices, you can also be unindexed from Google, or your ranking can drop pretty, dramatically. So it's so important to make sure that you are following those, ethical practices. But that's a little about what, crawling and indexing is and how important it is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know. And it explains the whole, like, how it doesn't see everything online. So that makes sense. And obviously it's whatever Google wants you to see too. So we're not going to go down that rabbit hole, but there's definitely that stuff there. And you also been mentioning the Alexa score. How can we figure out about that? I know it's just kind of, we'll call it arbitrary scoring. That's, some standard there. So I guess, what is that, and how can we go about finding out what our Alexa score is on our websites?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly. I did it years ago, but if you're okay with it, I can kind of send it to you maybe after this. But you could find your Alexa ranking. Basically, there's a site, you go Alexa ranking, you could basically type in your URL and it'll give you like an approximate amount. And it doesn't say It has basically like different levels. So if you're
Mhm.
like, it doesn't say you're typically like the number one site, but typically it'll give you like a range of where you're ranking. And from my understanding with HARO, they have a certain bar of the ranking, and I believe it might be 1 million, the top million sites or something along those lines. But that was years ago when I checked that. So you can definitely double check that. I could get you the links too after this, but you'll go to find out that Alexa ranking, and then you'll get an idea of like where your site's ranking, or kind of, that's what I did actually when I was starting to build that traffic. I just started to see like where I was going and how that was impacting my rankings and the traffic and things like that. So I paid attention to that, Google Analytics as well too, to see how much traffic I was driving in at that time.
Okay. Well, yeah, if you could share that afterwards, that'd be great. But yeah, I just was curious on that. And so I want to ask you one last question here, real quick, around websites and everything. As far as getting our brand identity out there, what do you think is the most powerful tool for us right now? I know we have social media, we have all the different platforms there, obviously with the blogs, with podcasts, with let's just go with that. I mean, we could go down other rabbit holes, but what would you say is probably one of the more powerful tools for us to really capitalize on to help us get towards getting on stages and getting our brand identity out into the world so people can know about us?
Yeah, so a part of like what I really talk about is really understanding who you're trying to target and working backwards from there. So my answer would definitely be it depends on who you're trying to target and what you're ultimately trying to do. But knowing that your audience is of speakers and people that are trying to get on these stages, I would say there's different ways that you can use these different platforms, whether it be Instagram or LinkedIn or, all of those different platforms that you have out there. What I would probably answer with is the component that's probably going to be the most valuable is the video aspect of it. So if you decide to do LinkedIn, I think being able to show yourself actually speaking to people is going to be huge. If you decide that your target market and the people that you're trying to connect with on Instagram, use the video aspect of Instagram. If you want to do a lot more long form type videos, then spend time really growing out your YouTube channel. And I think it's the beauty, the gift and the curse, I guess you can say, of each of these different platforms is they're starting to pick and choose and have the features that others have. So you really have to, I think, work backwards and understand that, hey, if I want to really connect with more of an association audience or maybe other business owners, and I want to be, known for being the HR expert, then you're probably going to spend more time on LinkedIn video. But if you know that, hey, I want to speak to teams, I want to, really make my presence felt amongst the next generation, the younger generation, you're probably going to spend more time creating videos on TikTok or maybe Instagram or some combination of that. So it's really, I think, leveraging the feature more within each of these, the video feature, because you want to basically help people to envision you already being on their stage. And if they can see that better than they can hear that, they hear your CV and your resume, and that's great. But if they say, I seen this video, this person talking, and he's captivating that audience, or he captivated me when I listened to this, or she captivated me, then you really have that opportunity to kind of get through that virtual door and I think be put on those stages.
Man, that's some great information there. And you're exactly right about that. People have to visualize seeing you on their stage for them to want to invite you to that stage. I like the way that you put that. That's perfect. And so I lied. I actually do have one more question. This is going to be something for the audience, but then also for you. What are you looking for as far as content if people want to be able to get published on CB Nation blog? What does that content look like?
Yeah, so we're heavy users of HARO, so that's definitely one of the sites that we use. We also use Turkle, the site that I mentioned as well too. So those are places that we always try to look for contributors. But we also have people that contribute on our site. But we have this equation that I kind of go back to kind of explain everything. And I say visibility plus resources times connections equals success. And one of the best things that I say is that every piece of content that we have, we try to hit one of those three pillars. You're going to hear a really great story, the visibility around a CEO, entrepreneur, business owner, something that really captivates you, that's going to draw you in. So we're always looking for people that are able to do that. From a resource standpoint, we're always looking for resources. Do you know about different, I call them hacks and nuggets. Do you know different, things in your industry that other people in the business community need to know and should know? It could be an association or a group. It could be the way that you're able to hack your TikTok followers, whatever it might be. We really want to know that information so that we can share that to, the overall community, and just the opportunity to connect as a whole. So I would say, to answer your question, if it falls in or even more than some of those three pillars, that's always, near and dear to my heart. And one other thing that I would say too is that you want to understand what the equation is for wherever you're trying to be featured as well. So understanding what their mission, vision, their goals are is going to be very helpful for you crafting your message so that you do kind of get on those stages that you have the opportunity to do.
Man, that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. And that definitely helps to get on CB Nation, but also helps with really anywhere else. That's awesome. This has been an awesome episode. But my last question that I always ask every guest is, if you only had one message that you could share for the rest of your life, what would that message be?
Absolutely. I love this question. And I think that one of the things that I often say on my show, that I really think is huge for everybody, is that if you run your own race, you can't lose. And the reason I bring that up is that, just as we were talking a lot about, like, how do you feel comfortable on stages? One of the things that I did, that I talked about doing small things. One of them, I went skydiving, and I went skydiving because I was fearful of heights. And doing those things were part of my race. But if somebody who goes skydiving all the time, they don't have a fear of heights, that's not going to be part of their race. And I bring that all home to say is that you have to stay true to yourself. You have to stay true to, your mission, your vision, your values, the things that you want to accomplish. And if you really understand that your race is your race and nobody can do it and run it like you, and you stay true to that, then that'll really set you up for the opportunity to succeed. So that's what I would leave people with. I think it's something I remind myself on a daily basis about, just to stay true to yourself and not to be stuck in everybody else's lane. And I think that's one of the most powerful things I can say.
Oh, that is. And we oftentimes compare ourselves to other people as well. We really have to stop doing that. So that's a great message. I definitely want to hear more about that in the future. I have to ask one question before I ask you where people can find you. We mentioned about that squirrel that attacked grandma. I want to know what happened to that squirrel and what happened to grandma too. Well, tell us about that story real quick.
Grandma's a full subscriber, so she got the issues and everything like that. So the squirrel ended up getting out. It found a way to get out. So it didn't actually attack grandma. It was just inside the house. But at the end of the day, grandma's okay. I imagine the squirrel's probably okay. But if you want to find out more, maybe I'll bring back another issue and we can have the squirrel issues.
There we go. Awesome. Awesome, man. Well, Gresh, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast here, sharing all this valuable information. I know I took a lot of notes. You guys need to go back and listen to the whole thing again. Take notes. If you're driving right now, go ahead and listen to that when you're not driving. But if people want to reach out to you, they want to be able to follow you and see your journey, where can they reach out to you? What's the best place?
Yeah, probably the absolute best place is if you go to iamgresh.com. That's IAMGRESH.com. That has links to everything, to Blue 16 Media, the podcast, CB Nation. You can always go to blue16media.com, but I would say the hub of everything is definitely at iamgresh.com.
Well, awesome. Gresh, thanks again for coming on and sharing all this value. It's been a tremendous help.
Definitely. I appreciate you, Philip.